Alright guys, I've been getting a lot of requests to make a video about how to make your wrist bigger. So the wrist is bone, ligament, and tendon. These things can get bigger, but it takes a long time. So if you have a job that's physical, like if you're swinging hammers or you're a pipe fitter, or anything that's very heavy on the wrist and all the movements of the wrist, over time your wrist will get thicker. If you don't have a job that does this, you're going to have to do this within a sport or through exercise. I have many videos on how to make your forearms big, how to make your hands bigger, you know, how to do it heavy, how to do hypertrophy based, how to do conditioning. You really have to do all of these things to make your wrists bigger, and it takes time, can take years, but they can get bigger. Now other factors that come into play is body fat. You know, I'm not skinny. I have a lot of body fat, maybe not a crazy amount on my forearms, but I do have body fat, and that's going to help to fill out your wrist and make your wrist thicker, right? If you're very thin and very, maybe you're in very good shape, it's going to be difficult to, you know, put a lot of girth on the wrist, because you're literally just building that girth with bone and tendon and ligament, which you can do, but the body fat does help. I don't know how much it helps. Like I don't have like tons of fat on my wrists or anything, but having a higher body fat percentage is going to make you look fuller and thicker in general. So another way to get a thicker wrist is to get into a sport that's heavy on the wrist. You know, things like dirt bike riding, arm wrestling. Obviously this is an arm wrestling channel. That's going to thicken your wrist, but not alone. You have to do the training too. You know, maybe rock climbing, jiu-jitsu, anything that's heavy on the wrist movement, where you're doing really heavy wrist movement, you're doing repetitive wrist movements, it's going to thicken up. You know, anyone who works on a farm, or you know someone who's a pipe fitter, a plumber, or a roofer, those are some thick, you know, probably thicker than my wrists, you know, and they're not even training it. So if you don't have a physical job that heavily demands on your wrist, if you're not in a sport that's heavy on the wrist, and you're not specifically training all the movements of your hand and wrist, and you have a very low body fat percentage, you know, maybe like a bodybuilder or something, you know, it's going to be difficult to get a bigger wrist. It's definitely a lifestyle change, and you know, that's how bones and ligaments and tendons grow, because they're just constantly being used as part of your everyday life. So you can either do that in your job, your sport, or you can train specifically for that. And like I said, this is an arm wrestling channel. I have tons of videos on arm wrestling, tons of videos on training and working out, and all those things will increase your wrist size over time, but it's not going to happen overnight. It could take a few years until you really see a significant difference. So I hope that helps, guys. I know a lot of people have been asking me that question, and there's really no quick way around it. There are muscles that terminate here. You know, you can see that this gets thicker here when I open and close my wrist. So there is stuff here that could just be body fat that's being pushed around there. You know, everything's a factor. So repetitive use of the wrist, a job that's heavy on the wrist, a sport that's heavy on the wrist, and then training specifically the hand and wrist, all the movements. Okay, not just cup, everything the hand and wrist does, you have to train that. You know, heavy hypertrophy and conditioning, and yeah, your wrist will get thicker. It will get thicker.